Well, good evening there, Hoosiers. Welcome to another Progressive Indiana Network virtual town hall. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, host of the Who's Left podcast, and I am here this evening once again with Brad Meyer, Democratic candidate running here in Indiana's 9th Congressional District, here to answer your questions this evening. We are taking comments and questions for Brad in the chat, live on YouTube, on Facebook Live, and of course at our home at progressiveindiana.net. So please, if you have things you would like to hear about from Brad, you go ahead and put your questions right there in the chat, and I will put them on screen. As long as everything is nice and respectful, we haven't had any problems with that yet in any of these we've done so far. So please behave. Look forward to hearing what you've got to say. But for right now, let me turn this thing over to Brad for an introduction.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me on. This is the third one out of, I think, 4. Do we have one more of these scheduled before the election?
We do. That is April 26th. Put it on your calendars now, folks.
Yeah. So, and I've really enjoyed these discussions, and it's an opportunity to hear from and talk with people throughout the district. So I really enjoyed that. So I thought I'd give a quick thumbnail sketch for those of you that haven't heard or seen me before. I'm Brad Meyer. I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives in the 9th District, and that is from Monroe County all the way to the Ohio line, and basically Monroe County all the way down. So for me, it's about, because I live in Monroe County, it's about 2 hours wide and 2 hours deep. It covers about 18 counties. And in addition to doing these 3 virtual town halls, we've also done about, 15 or 16 town halls in various places throughout the district, bigger cities, and throughout the rest of the district. And I've been trying to really make a point of getting out to every county that I can and have an opportunity to talk and listen with people. So.
Well, very good. So thank you for being here with us once again. And thanks for the opportunity to do these. I know not everybody can get out to these many town halls you do. I mean, yeah. I know it sounds like you've been doing a ton and trying to reach folks wherever they're at. But hey, man, life's busy. Sometimes people can't make it to these events. So I hope by doing these, we get a chance to reach even more people where they're at. And again, we look forward to taking your questions right here in the chat on Facebook, YouTube, and at progressiveindiana.net. So, Brad, I guess I want to start tonight while we're waiting for folks to sort of line up and get their questions in. Last time we did one of these, this war in Iran was hours old, I believe. It was the day before were the first strikes. So I guess with that, I would like to ask you what in the last month you've seen. Has your thinking evolved on these things? Maybe even remind folks where we were a month ago when this thing had just kicked off. Your initial thoughts and maybe how they've evolved, if they've evolved since then.
Sure. So there's really like so many problems. There are several facets to it, right? And the first thing that really needs to be considered is, has this been done constitutionally? And the Republicans are saying, well, he's got the War Powers Act and he's got this and he's got that. But really, as with many things, he's really abusing the War Powers Act. This needed to be done constitutionally. He's talking about, this is not a response to an imminent threat. He's talking about it as a war, and it is a war. So Congress has the power to declare war, not him. And Congress needs to do their dang job, right? They either need to authorize they either need to declare war, which is their responsibility, or they need to shut off funding, right? And what they're doing right now is they're weaseling. They are saying, well, we didn't authorize it, we didn't unauthorize it, and maybe we'll fund, and they're going to fund it. but I think that the way they're doing it constitutionally puts us at risk in the long run, and frankly in the short run. I think this is going to happen again. He's already done it twice. There's no reason to believe he's not going to do it a third time. Then the second thing is, if Congress had done its job properly, would the American people have supported going to war with Iran given the circumstances we have? And I really believe the answer is no. And I think that's part of the reason that they didn't take it to the American people, because they knew it wouldn't be popular. It's we all know what the problems are. It's driving up gas prices. It is undermining relationships with our allies, and it is wounding and antagonizing a foe that my greatest fear at this point, honestly, is that Trump is going to go in, he's going to do all the damage he's doing, he's going to do more damage, and then he's going to lose interest and say, well, I'm done, I met my objectives. And he's going to forget about it. Iran is not going to forget about it. So he's put us in a situation that I think is really dangerous in the short run and the long run. It's a hugely dangerous precedent for our democracy.
So I guess, Brad, let me follow up on that. It sounds like, you were not a fan of this thing. Not justified.
Yeah.
And so, but you hear from folks like Michigan Senator Alyssa Slotkin, who I believe was quoted as saying, well, we're in it. So now Trump has gotten us into this mess. And the logic from certain Democrats is like, well, okay, we're in this thing. We have to fund it, to support our troops or whatever. And it does seem like an end run around the entire process of congressional authorization. So would you agree with Slotkin's line of thinking that, well, we're in it and you have to fund it? Or would you use the power of the purse to say, no, get out, stop? Quit doing this?
So I'm going to start by answering a different question, and then I'm going to answer the question that you actually asked, right? So one of the other problems with this war in Iran is that when Obama was finishing up his first term, he worked with the international community and our allies, and they came up with a potential treaty that would address the nuclear side. And a lot of our allies, they invested political capital into, and they had to make concessions, and they had to go on the record, and they had to do some heavy lifting. And we convinced them as leaders of the free world that they needed to follow our lead. And then Trump went in and he pulled the plug. And when he did that, and most people have forgotten about it, when he did that about 8 years ago now, what he did was he alienated our allies so that they don't trust our leadership in this anymore. So they're not going to sign on to things that we try to do in cooperation with the rest of the world. And the Iranians understood that they cannot trust the Trump presidency to deal in good faith. So there's no bargaining. What he did in that one instance is he removed diplomacy from the table. He removed it during his administration and also the Biden administration, so that war was much more likely as the only alternative we had, because diplomacy would fail, or our diplomacy was taken off the table. Now, you can argue, and this is all theoretical, you could argue that diplomacy was never going to work, that they were always going to cheat on the system. But if they didn't try it, then that's a real problem. That's a failure. So now we'll answer your question, now that we're in it. Okay. I am very concerned because there's an old axiom that says never wound something that you can't kill. And we have definitely attacked and wounded Iran, and how we extract ourselves from that and how we reestablish or establish a better relationship is extremely difficult. And I think that the right answer would be to impeach Trump for declaring war outside of his authority, take him out of office, and then end the war.
I'll tell you what, that is a different answer, a different route than I think I've heard just about anybody saying. So I appreciate the unique line of thinking. Certainly, I know we've talked about impeachment here before in this space, and pick your impeachable offense. This one does seem to be perhaps the most egregious.
Absolutely. He's put American lives at risk. He's put our economy at risk. He did it outside of the proper relationship between the branches of government. I think that they need to say that was unacceptable. You're fired,
to borrow a phrase.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to change course here and go to our web form. We had a few people submit questions ahead of time, and good ones, if you ask me.
Okay.
For example, Tom in New Albany asks, what is your media strategy should you become the nominee? The last election, Tom saw zero media presence, and it is his hope that that is not the case this year. So I guess, how do you propose to break through the sort of media bubble here in Southern Indiana? Certainly, funding has to be a part of that. I imagine, the Republicans are infinitely resourced compared to the Democrats, it seems. Or, even with our bifurcated, balkanized media, is seeing stuff on TV, as it were, does that even matter anymore,
So, every area of media has their own constituency and their own, I was going to say fan base, but that's probably not the right term to use. So, obviously, social media is infinitely more important than it was 4 years ago and 8 years ago, and it's going to continue to be more important. And we have put some people on the team to help with social media. We're now on, I think, 8 platforms. We're on Facebook and Instagram and Bluesy and X and YouTube, and there's probably a couple others. And we've also started trying to engage in Reddit, and so the outreach has been really good, and we're just now in the last couple of months really starting to spin that up through the primary. One of the issues is that younger voters or younger adults don't tend to vote. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. The number one reason is I don't think we've given them a good reason to vote. We as Democrats say, well, you agree with our policies and you agree with, what we're trying to do, but really their opportunity is shrinking and shrinking. And there's no reason, I shouldn't say that. We don't give them as much reason as we should to get off the couch and go vote, or leave work early and go vote. I'm not saying they're sitting on the couch. And that's one of the reasons we're reaching out on Bluesy and Instagram and some of the other platforms. We're bringing in some younger people in the team to help us understand some of the messages and concerns that we need to address. We just had a meeting today and was talking about some of that as well. Now, having said that, there are a surprising number of small newspapers that are surviving, and I'm not going to say thriving, but they're moving forward. So we're going to need to get into some of the local media, which we have done only a little bit up to this point in the primary. So it's going to have to be a full court press.
It's certainly not as easy as it was, I suppose, when there were, 3 or 4 television channels and that's just where everybody was at. Now there's so many different places where you can reach folks. And yeah, it really is a matter of, figuring out who you need to reach and then where they're at. A lot more legwork, it seems, going in. I've got an interesting question here on Facebook that just came in, and it's a simple question, yet there's a lot to it. So we're going to ask from Robin on Facebook, who asks, why are you the best candidate for the Dems in the 9th District?
So there's a couple reasons that I believe that I'm the right candidate. Number one, I have a variety of experience. I worked 25 years in manufacturing leadership positions here in Indiana. I've seen what small companies need. I have seen, frankly, good management in some companies where they have taken care of their workers. They've been fair and equitable with their workers. I've also worked at companies that they were just trying to squeeze every dime out of everything and every person. And really, having been behind closed doors on the management side, it made me really understand why we need unions, right? That the imbalance of power between employees and employers, and sometimes the coercive things that employers tend to do, it gave me a better appreciation of why there needs to be a better balance. And union jobs represent 25 to 30% better total compensation packages than the non-union jobs. After having done that for 25 years, the last 9 years of my career, I spent as a subject matter expert working for the Navy. I was a civilian employee of the Navy, so I had an opportunity to see how government works, how funding works, how funding issues affect how projects get done. So I've got a better understanding. It also gave me a deeper understanding and appreciation for what our service members do and what their sacrifices are. I'm also a much stronger progressive than the other candidates. And I guess finally, I am tired of just thoughts and prayers about the struggles. I'm tired of just playing defense, that the Republicans will put our health care at risk, and then we fight really hard to get us back to the scrimmage line. And when we're all done, the best we can do is get us back to where we were in 2024. We're not driving forward for a better, stronger future. We're just trying to manage decline. And this is not what I'm doing. I am not playing defense. I'm advocating for universal nonprofit healthcare, economic things that are going to make a difference in people's lives, like a $20 an hour minimum wage. We need to grab the ball and start running instead of playing defense.
I like it. Well, I'll tell you what, we've had a couple more questions come in, so I'm going to ask those. But before I do, you opened up a couple lines that I wanted to pursue. You mentioned organized labor, and I had a question sort of teed up for you along those lines. Now, you said you support organized labor. Great.
Yeah.
It's a worthwhile position to have. I guess we want to know what that looks like in terms of details. So the PRO Act has languished in Congress, the last 4 Congresses, actually. So would you support it? And, what's it going to take to get that thing over the finish line in the next Congress?
So I'm a little bit sad, the last sentence of that, because I was going to say we need to support the PRO Act. And now it looks like I'm just following along in the hymnal. But we do need to support the PRO Act. We do need in Indiana, that they've got a right to what they call a right to work law, which is really the right to work for less law. It undermines the unions. Um, and yeah, we need to pass the PRO Act. We need the unions help build the middle class, and they they pulled union power back away and union representation. And you know what? The middle class is slipping. So I think it's a really straightforward issue that we need to rebalance this, and things like the PRO Act need to happen.
All right, fantastic. So let's go back to our chat, and we had a question from Chris Brandon Embry on Facebook. And this one is very important to folks right now. You know, we mentioned the war in Iran and some of the downstream effects that Hoosiers are feeling are at the gas pump, and we're also going to see it at the grocery store as transportation costs kind of percolate through the whole economy. Then you have the fertilizer shortage that we're dealing with as well, because that travels through the Strait of Hormuz. So, we might not be feeling things the same way they are there in the Middle East in terms of pain, but we are feeling economic pain here at home. What are your thoughts on the Indiana gas tax increase on April 1st? Chris asks that in the question. Obviously, that is an Indiana question that needs to be dealt with by the governor and the legislature here. But what's the federal angle of that?
So we'll start by answering the question directly, and then taking one step back and looking at what's really happening, because what's happening in Indiana is kind of a microcosm of what's happening at the federal level. With the laws that have been passed in the last year, I think it's Senate Bill 1, they have modified the way funding happens, and they are cutting the property taxes, and everybody's happy about cutting property taxes and other taxes, but taxes pay for services. And there's this big disconnect that, if you want to cut taxes, you also need to be willing to cut services. And so what the state government did is they said, well, we're going to cut these taxes. We're going to limit what you can do on taxes in this way, but you can make it up with a wheel tax, and you can make it up with this tax, and you can make it up with this tax. And you go by all the way through. They're regressive taxes. They are taxes that hurt poor people or working people more and disproportionately than it does more wealthy people. So they've successfully moved some of the tax burden from property owners to renters. Okay. So the gas tax is another kind of example of that. People with lower incomes tend to have older cars, which have lower gas mileage. Like my car is a hybrid, and it gets 45 miles to the gallon, so I don't buy as much gas as I used to. And really, I should probably pay more in taxes as a result of that, because gas taxes pay for roads and road repairs, which we need, right? We have bridges that need to be repaired. Okay. We have roads that need to be repaired. But the gas tax was intended to be basically a use tax, right? You pay for gasoline, and that pays for the roads that you're going to use the gasoline on. I think at this point, it's just pouring more regressive taxes on people.
All right, very good. So I want to go back to our web form, and a couple people, like I said, got their questions in early, and I want to go back to another one. And this is from Anna, also in New Albany, and she asks, since it's impossible to know about every single topic, who are and who will be your advisors or staffers to help you understand issues and know how to vote and sign on to legislation?
And I really love that question, because that is a really key issue that I think people need to consider. And all I can tell you is what I've done up to this point that speaks to your question. Very early, and I mean like very early, within the first 2 months of me getting into this race, I reached out to some local community leaders on immigration. And I sat down and I had a roundtable discussion. And there's no pictures and there's no recording. This was not a photo op. I just sat down and I listened and I asked questions. And I said, look, this is my perspective. This is my current understanding. Help me understand better where I've got gaps and where you think that we need to be working. And I took input from them. And then I sat down with a well-respected person here in the community that's an advocate for Medicare for All. And I sat down with him and I said, hey, there's an organization, and I'm now a member of this organization, which is Physicians for a National Health Program. Very good organization. People should look at it. And I talked to them and said, hey, this is my perspective. Help me understand what I'm missing, and what would reasonable policy look like. I've talked to some other people as well. I've done additional research. I've added a guy named Dr. Tom Ferry to help me go through how we can get to a national health plan. And then I sat down with a group of people. I was interested and concerned about what's happening with people with disabilities and the ever increasing denial-based and intentionally complex system that was being put in place. And I sat down with them and I sat down with a group of people and said, tell me about how these new policies affect education for people with disabilities. And then we had another roundtable and said, tell me how this affects people with disabilities for economics, and tell me about it with healthcare. And then we also had another roundtable that talked about issues of dependency and mental health. And then we sat down with another group and talked with them and listened to them about environmental. Okay. And we've had, I don't know, 15, 16 town halls where we've been asking people what they thought and what their issues were. And I've been giving answers and they've been giving feedback. And sometimes they don't like my answers and they force me to think more deeply about some issues. So I'm still listening and I'm still considering input. And that's the way this whole campaign has been. I'm reaching out to people that are knowledgeable, people that are affected by these policies, and I'm asking for a better understanding. And there's going to be a lot of issues, and issues we haven't even thought of yet that aren't even on the horizon. Even in the next 2 years, they're going to sneak up. And that's the approach we need to take.
Well, let me follow up on that, Brad, because I'm glad you brought up the Physicians for National Health Program. I just had Dr. Rob Stone on the Sunday morning show.
Oh, nice.
Morning.
Rob's a great guy.
Well, yeah, love Dr. Rob. But one of the things I guess I want to think about is how the transition to a single payer health plan would work. We're both single payer fans, Medicare for all people, or whatever you want to call it. But what happens to employer sponsored insurance in that scenario, and what does this transition period look like?
So we'll start by talking about the timeline. So there is a lot of, I guess, concern. People that are interested in this, in a transition, they know that the existing system isn't right, but there's concern about what does a transition look like, right? And frankly, the people that are invested in the existing system are using that to their advantage. So let's start with, is it even reasonable to do? England transitioned in 6 years, and 3 of those years they were still fighting the Germans. So they really did it in 3 years. The second thing to remember is that when we implemented Medicare in the 1960s, we did it in 1 year, and we did it on 3x5 index cards. Right? And you say, well, if we can implement that in a year in index cards, and it took, there was follow on after that, then surely we can do something in 3 years. And there's a law that's been proposed and worked on over multiple years, because it keeps getting knocked down by the Republicans and getting refined. And Physicians for a National Health Plan or program have worked through a lot of those details and advocated for them. And the last thing, when you talk about how can we do this, half of us are already on a single payer system now, which is Medicare, Medicaid, and other government run services. So it's not like we have to invent something from whole cloth, and we're using a white piece of paper and starting from scratch. We're building on that. The other thing is that 38 other countries have already done it, comparable to us. Australia, Canada, Ireland, Great Britain, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and on and on, and obviously Norway and the Balkan states. All of the countries have done it. It's all achievable. One of the things that I've been working with, again, Dr. Thomas Ferry, is to put out some more detailed information. And right now, he and I have been working closely for the last couple of weeks off and on, and I've got a couple more meetings with him. And right now, it's about a 25-page document that goes through all of the questions and answers about that transition. 25 pages is way too long. Part of what we're going to be able to do is work on paring that down so it's an easier read for people, and we'll get that out on the website. It's a doable thing. And if you want to hear more information, if you want to hear more information on this topic, there will be a debate. And if I were 2% smarter, I'd have the date in front of me. But
are you referring to the healthcare forum that's being put on here in Bloomington by Physicians for a National Health Pro? That is
7th or 11th?
April 7th at I want to say 7 p.m. Yes.
Yep. Very good.
All right. Fantastic. So along those lines, Brad, we talked about the sort of the fear of the transition, and how is this going to disrupt the thing that we're already doing is part of a reason that folks are maybe wary of major changes to our healthcare program. Well, another thing that people are sort of wary of, especially small business owners, and you mentioned you support a $20 minimum wage. I think a lot of small business owners are like, oh, that's going to put me under. So how do you talk to those folks and maybe assuage their fears that a $20 minimum wage is too high and that'll put them out of business?
I've had that question a couple of times, and that is a reasonable question, and it needs to be considered when you talk about implementing a $20 hour minimum wage. Right. So number one, getting universal, nonprofit, single payer, Medicare for all off of their desk to worry about will have a direct financial benefit to small businesses. A lot of their administrative costs are related to healthcare. Once a year they have to go through it. It's going to help financially to eliminate some costs, which will make that $20 an hour minimum wage much more doable. One of the other questions that I've had is a starting wage. $20 an hour minimum wage should be something that people are moved into. And, a lot of places that I worked, they started you at one salary, And then at 90 days, when you got through your 90-day probationary period, then they bumped up your salary, right? And so I think that there's going to have to be some discussion and negotiation of how we implement this, so that that it doesn't discourage small business. The other thing is that, and I know that there is some anxiety. The question says, how do we do this without putting them under? Every meaningful change, that question has always been asked. I remember when the Americans with Disability Act came through. People were fighting that tooth and nail, saying it's going to destroy business. And you know what? Business thrived after that went through. They found that it was better. Putting more money in workers' hands, especially at the lower income levels, is going to help small businesses, right? So, the net effect over time, if implemented prudently, but not lazily. I'm not saying we should phase in $20 an hour over 5 years. I'm just saying the bill needs to be written in a way that the transition makes sense, but it needs to transition.
Yeah, 100%. It's been entirely too long since the working class, especially at the bottom of the salary scale, has had a raise. And like you said, that money gets spent into the economy right away. It's
Right.
not like it's getting hoarded in Cayman Islands accounts when you give people a raise of the minimum wage.
Well, I'll pull one more thread on this topic. One of the things that the minimum wage, number one, politically, what they've done is, if the average, if the majority of starting wages start here, and your minimum wage is down here, then you say, hey, I'm going to raise the minimum wage up to here, which is still below the minimum, the real minimum that people are actually paying. You're not doing anything, but you get to brag about raising the minimum wage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that we've gotten in this mindset of, the minimum wage is what you give kids. The minimum wage is what you give people that are starting to work, right? But if you look at where young adults are right now, they need enough money that they can eat, that they can get launched, that they can start their lives, and we need to do better.
Certainly, we absolutely do. So, you mentioned as we're talking about the minimum wage, and I was thinking when I was in management in the hospitality business many years ago. Boy, when the last minimum wage raise went through in like 2009, that was one of the concerns of ownership was, how are we going to afford this? And yeah, it turns out, it just went to our customers also got a raise, right? So good for them. But I want to ask about your time in management, which you mentioned a little bit earlier, and you spent 25 years, you said, in manufacturing leadership. How would you describe your leadership style, and how does that translate to serving in Congress? Because everybody wants to be the leader there, right? There's 500 odd people. Everybody wants to be the guy. How do you get along with all these folks? A lot of egos there.
Yes, I would say that my management style was evolved over time. When I was a young manager, I was proud of the fact that I was brutally honest with my employees. And as I matured a little bit and got a little bit more experience and really reflected, I realized you don't have to be brutal to be honest, right? And one of the things that I did try to do is I looked for people that had not had opportunity but had ability, and there were several people that I put into leadership positions. There were, I don't know, I had maybe 15 people at one company, and um, I promoted two women into leadership roles that had been doing a lot of good work, but really had never been given an opportunity to lead. I hired the first over the strong objections, which by the way was illegal, of the HR manager. I hired the first three Hispanics. One of the things that nobody talks about, but there is a bias against people that are morbidly obese. And there was a couple of people that worked for me that were very talented, but were never given opportunity because there was not subliminal bias in that. So that I tried to reach out and give opportunity to everyone, and I tried to make sure that people had an opportunity to do their best. And honestly, I was better later in my career than I was early in my career as a manager. And it by the end of my career in leadership positions, my last position, I got chided by my boss because Brad, you need to be taking point on this. And I told him that I took this job to lead the leaders, not to be the center of attention. And I have gotten beyond that point in my life where I need to be the center of attention. Now, unfortunately, in this job, I have to be the center of attention while I'm campaigning. So I'm having to do a little bit of reverting, but really, there's a lot less ego than there was earlier in my career, and frankly, a lot more empathy than there was earlier in my career.
Boy, I'll tell you, that's something we certainly don't have enough of in Washington is empathy. You know, in another part of your professional career, you worked as a Navy civilian, right?
Yes.
Along with the Department of Defense, and you worked alongside veterans, I assume, or at least maybe folks who served.
Oh yeah.
And one thing we do a terrible job of is taking care of our veterans in this country. And I can't believe we haven't talked about this really over the course of these town halls we've had. So I wanted to ask you about the VA. Um, you know, uh, Homelessness should not exist, but homeless veterans should definitely not exist. And that population is certainly overrepresented among the unhoused. So I guess I'm throwing a lot at you there in terms of our veterans, but the VA is under resourced. There's always this talk of privatizing it. Can it be reformed? Does the VA need a complete overhaul? How can we be taking better care of the folks who serve this country?
Well, we'll start with the VA portion of the question. The way the VA is funded and managed by Congress is it starts out at some level of performance, and they cut money and they cut benefits and they squeeze and they reduce and they eliminate waste and they consolidate and they try to privatize, and the quality of care drops down and down and down and down. And when it gets low enough that frankly people are dying, are really suffering, there's congressional hearings and
Oh, Brad's breaking up here a little bit. Hopefully, that he comes right back online here and isn't down for long. Um, in this time, I would like to take opportunity to solicit your questions here. We've got about 15 minutes left here in our
There we go.
program this evening. Oh, there's Brad. He's back. All right.
There you go. All right. So anyway, it degrades because of not just incompetence, but intentional mismanagement by Congress. And then they have hearings. They fire the people that they underfunded and undersupported, and they bring a new person in with higher funding, and then it works again for a while, right? This is true of our medical system in general. And the only way that we can stop this is everybody has to be in, nobody is out. Not a single person, not a single citizen in the United States should be outside of the Medicare for all type system, a single payer system. Now, veterans have we have special responsibilities to our veterans. And before saying we need to pull the plug and just put everybody into that one system, I'd really like to talk to veterans groups and see how they feel about that, or whether we need the VA system to be retained the way it is, how that looks inside of a universal healthcare system. I'm going to have to seek some input from veterans on how they feel about that. But everybody has to be covered. You talk about homelessness. One of the biggest issues that affect homelessness in general is how we treat mental health and mental illness. And there are people that have experienced very difficult things, and they're struggling with difficulties. The suicide rate among veterans is too high. We need to do something about that, and I feel strongly about that. But we need more, again, than thoughts and prayers. We need mental health support for all of us, especially veterans, is woefully underfunded, and we have to fix it.
Absolutely. 100% there for sure. So I guess, another thing, Brad, that I'm surprised we haven't gotten to in this series of town halls we've done is these tariffs, which were very much the sort of highlight of Trump's economic program. Now, he imposed these tariffs unilaterally and broadly, but his methods aside, does he have a point? Is there a role for tariffs that, i.e. import taxes in our economy, or do you support free trade?
So
scare quotes around free trade, right?
Everything
comes with a cost.
Yeah. So there are three things with this, and I will try to be brief, although it's not my nature. Number one, tariff is setting tariffs is a congressional responsibility. Trump violated that. I believe that's an impeachable offense, and our Congress is not doing their job. So we need new Congress people, and that's why I'm running. Okay. Number two, you say, does tariff? So if Congress had done their job and they had stood up and said, we want to look at tariff policy, what does a good tariff policy mean? Tariffs are a form of tax, and they tend to be more regressive. And I'm not in favor of regressive taxes. Regressive taxes meaning it has a disproportionate effect on working class and working poor, right? So I'm not in favor of those types of taxes. Having said that, if economically it made sense to have higher tariffs than what we had, okay, fine. But all of that here's the real issue. We are 4% of the world's population. And, Trump says, and a lot of people say that we're being ripped off, and we need to, we need to get fair trade. And so here's the real deal. We are 4% of the world's population. We are 33% of the world's wealth. And in spite of that, 18 million households in the United States live with food insecurity. Okay. I think 12% roughly of the American people live at, near, or below the poverty line. Okay. So when Trump and his isolationists are saying that, well, we need better trade policies, what they're really saying is, and what our trading partners are legitimately hearing, what we're really saying is we want it all. We want everything. We're not satisfied with 4% of the world's population having 33% of the world's wealth. We want it all, right? And now he's saying, I'm going to threaten you if you don't give me what I want. And the bottom line is that if they gave us all of it, if the United States was 4% of the world's population and 100% of the world's wealth, nobody listening to this program would get a dime more than they're making now. We are not getting ripped off by our trading partners. We're getting ripped off by Congress and the economic policies that we have. It's on us and it's under our control. And that needs to be fixed.
And we're getting ripped off by some of the large businesses that are not facing competition because we've got so much consolidation across industries that without competition you can charge whatever you want basically. And so one area where this is particularly problematic, not just in terms of price, is in terms of the information spaces and media. And a handful of conglomerates now own most of what most Americans read and watch and scroll. What, if anything, should Congress be doing about media consolidation?
So we have antitrust laws. We have an FCC. This is under our power. And we're not using it. And Congress is complicit in making this happen and maybe explicit intentionally allowing and encouraging this to happen. Media consolidation is a serious problem and is a direct threat to the long-term stability of our constitutional democracy.
I agree. So, hey, we got a question here on Facebook. I want to bring that up. And this is from Anna, who asks, how will you stay in tune with your constituents? Policies get complex. How will you make sure you are representing constituents well and listening to their concerns?
So this goes along with the previous question. In the last 6 weeks, I've had 15, 16 town halls. I stopped counting. And here's one of the interesting thing about those town halls. When I started running, there were people who told me that I need to spend all of my time in the 3 major Democratic strongholds, right? And it's important that I spend time there, and I'm not in any way dissing those communities. But we need to be out and we've been out to Franklin. We went out to Jackson County and Jefferson County and Washington County and Scott and on and on and on. We have to be going to all of these counties. And you talk about the constituents. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is that, number one, when I win, not if I win, when I win and go to Congress, my constituents are everybody that lives in the Ninth. It is not just people that live in Bloomington like me. It's not just the Democrats. It is also the Republicans who are not going to be happy with me no matter what I do, but I'm still required and ethically responsible to look toward their interests, and the independents. So I've done a lot of town halls in the last month. We're going to have to do a lot more town halls. I'm going to have to come home on a regular basis and spend time in the community, and do what I have been doing all along, which is reaching out to people that have areas of interest and concern and expertise to make sure that I'm making good policy for the people of Indiana.
All right. So, listen, I want to let you know, Brad. You know you've been crisscrossing the southern part of the state here, meeting people in all these counties you just talked about. From cities to small towns and even smaller towns. But you've got a fan in a place you wouldn't think of, and that is Norway. We've got a viewer from Norway watching us tonight,
Okay.
who seems to like what you're saying and wants to know, when's Brad going to run for president?
Well, all right. So the first thing is let's remember that Norway is like 5-6 hours ahead. So this person is staying up way late to ask this question. So I really appreciate it. So I'll tell you right now, I'm not thinking about running for president. I really want to represent the people of Southern Indiana. I'm a seventh generation Hoosier. We really, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's going to be a heavy lift. And I'm looking forward to being a good representative.
Good to hear. It seems like there's always another rung on the ladder to climb, and everybody's trying to get out of the job they're campaigning for before they're even in it.
Not me. I never planned on running for office at all. This was not something I aspired to. My wife and I were on a glide path to a nice, quiet retirement that we got to spend. We were going to get to spend time together and be financially secure, and I looked forward to that life. And when Trump came to power, I saw the risks to our democracy, the risks to our economy. I saw what was going to happen, and I felt called or compelled to run for office to do something about it. This is not a matter of personal ambition for me at this stage in my life. So there's for those of you that are Roman history fans, you can look up the story of Cincinnatus or Cincinnatus. That is more the way I would model myself, except he was actually labeled dictator, which is not where I'm going at all, right? So I got to clear this up. The whole point of his story is he was given power, he made things better, and then he returned to his farm because he had done his job. And I am still looking forward to the day that this is under control. We're better off than we were, and I can go to that retirement that I'm looking forward to with my wife and family.
Oh, why, you're not planning to stay in Congress till you're like 90, like some of these guys?
No.
So listen, Brad, we've only got about a minute and a half left. I've really appreciated you being here, and I do appreciate the opportunity to do all of these with you. And we got another one coming up here with Brad on the 26th of April there, just a little over a week out before the primary election. And I've got I'm booked on Sunday nights. It turns out before the election, in addition to Brad, we've got several other great candidates coming up throughout the month of April, and even one right before the election in May. But if folks like what they have heard from you tonight, where can the good people find more information about your campaign?
So you can go to bradmeyer.org, and if you want to find us on any of our social medias, on that website, there's a tab called Socials, and it will give you the links to all of those. You can find us on Facebook, which is Brad Meyer for Indiana, but a good start would be bradmeyer.org, MEYER.
Very good. All right, folks. Well, you know what to do. Brad can use your time, talent, and treasure if you are so inclined. But whatever you do, make sure you are registered to vote. April 6th is the deadline here in Indiana. All right. Well, once again, folks, Brad Meyer, candidate for Congress here in the 9th. Thank you for joining us this evening, sir.
Thank you for your time, and thank you all for listening.
All right, folks. Have a good night. Love each other.
Good night.